Welcome back to the deep dive. So you've been sending us a ton of source material, the articles, the fan theories, all the dramatic recaps, and it's all focused on the final, most intense weeks of Big Boss 19.
It really is. We are talking about that ultimate pressure cooker environment, right before the grand finale, which is set for December 7, 2025.
And what you sent us, I mean, it frankly reads less like simple reality TV and more like a high-stakes real-time investigation.
Yeah, into narrative manipulation, emotional warfare, and just outright explosive human conflict.
Absolutely.
And that's really the perfect lens to view this endgame through. We're looking at a time when the stakes are at their absolute highest and the masks are, well, they're coming off.
Or, depending on how you look at it, the scripts are being executed perfectly.
Exactly. So our mission today is really laser focused. We need to understand that intersection of raw human conflict and what people perceive as narrative engineering.
The scripting, the bias.
Right. We're going to unpack the most polarizing figures, the spiritual influencer who sort of revealed her own cynicism, the alleged conflict witch, and yes, the one who spat in the pool.
And on top of that, we had to analyze the host's really pointed reality checks, break down that shocking double eviction that carved out the final top 8.
And, crucially, we need to contextualize the physical fights, the ones that had viewers online demanding immediate expulsions from the house.
It has just been a whirlwind. Accusations of fixed outcomes, blatant hypocrisy and violence that just seem to defy the show's own stated rules. So we're going beyond the surface chatter here. We're drilling down into the specific details, the quotes, the actions that define this final countdown.
And the core question for this deep dive is this. Was this just the natural chaos of a long, grueling reality show? Or was the shadow of a meticulously planned script unfolding right before our eyes?
That is the question.
So let's unpack this. I think we should start with the personalities that have just dominated the conversation, specifically the ones whose initial images were systematically demolished under the pressure of this final stretch.
And we have to begin with Tanya Mittal.
We have to.
Okay, so let's dive into Tanya. When she entered the house, she was introduced and she established herself very quickly as the epitome of grace.
Oh, absolutely. She was positioned as the most sanskari, motivational girl of the century.
Her entire brand was built on this deep spirituality, positivity, and a kind of moral high ground. She came in with this polished veneer that seemed, immune to the usual Big Boss chaos.
And that polished veneer is precisely what became the focus of this profound hypocrisy narrative that all the sources get into.
It's a huge part of her story.
Her whole game arc pivoted on a series of public statements that just shifted wildly, depending on who was useful to her at any given moment. Her self-proclaimed image was all about deep spirituality and goodness. She actually claimed she listens to stories of Sri Ram and Sri Krishna before sleeping.
And she would advise others to keep goodness in our eyes so the world would look good to them.
Exactly. It was this very, almost priestly persona.
But the sources allege that the reality we saw inside the house was a complete 180-degree turn from that.
A very public and, frankly, a very glaring pivot. I mean, the most egregious example that the fan community latched onto is her just baffling change of heart regarding Amal Malik.
Okay, let's break that down.
Earlier in the season, before any serious rivalry had developed, the sources note she was intensely complimentary towards him.
She was a fan.
A huge fan. She was quoted saying things like, "Our hearts beat for Amal." She even went so far as to offer to open a music studio for him because she wanted his God-given talent to be used properly.
So that's the language of a devoted supporter and admirer.
Yeah.
What happened between that moment of adoration and these final contentious weeks?
Well, just a few weeks of competitive pressure happened, and that entire narrative just dissolved. The moment Amal became an obstacle in her path.
She flipped.
Completely. She dramatically shifted her stance, asking dismissively, "Who is Amal? Is he inspiring people?" And then she called him a newbie, a nibda.
And for anyone listening who might not know that term, nubda, it's a pretty derogatory term. It implies someone is a rookie, totally inexperienced, maybe even talentless.
Right, and she topped it off by saying, "I didn't even know him." This level of reversal led critics to say she wasn't just changing her opinion, she was completely rewriting history.
And they use that local idiom. Right?
Yes, thuk karket chakna, which basically means to spit and then immediately lick it back up. It symbolizes extreme shamelessness and inconsistency.
And what makes this look even more strategic, or maybe just deeply cynical, is that it's basically provided the exact metric by which the audience should judge her.
Exactly, the devastating podcasting paradox. She had previously stated in a public forum that real people don't need to remember what they say because their truth is constant.
But liars, she said, forget.
Liars forget, she argued, and they have to tell more lies to cover up the first ones. And the sources immediately held that mirror right up to her face. They highlighted how she had to constantly invent new justifications.
Like saying she was just over-caring to explain away manipulative behavior.
Oh, right, proving that she was the very liar she had described in her own podcast.
And this is where it gets really interesting, though, the alleged master strategy. Because it goes beyond just simple forgetfulness and points towards, well, calculated moves to manipulate the audience.
Yes. The sources suggest she had a specific conscious plan to win over the general viewership.
This is the live feed clip.
This is the infamous live feed clip. It went viral, generated massive controversy. It allegedly captured Tanya discussing how the Indian audience is very emotional, and she states openly that she knows precisely how to win their hearts.
And how is she going to do that?
This translated directly into what critics started calling the ram card, after she would start or get into a really heated conflict, especially if she knew she was coming across as being in the wrong.
She'd pivot.
Immediately, she would pivot, appeal to her spiritual persona by repeatedly chanting, invoking piety, or just, seeking this perceived moral high ground.
So the spiritual persona wasn't just some background noise for her character.
Right.
According to these sources, it was a calculated emotional weapon.
That's the argument. That it was designed to capitalize on the audience's deep-seated sentimentality, using religion or perceived goodness to deflect from her actual actions.
That is an incredibly high-level and deeply cynical way to play this game.
It creates a huge ethical question for you, the viewer. Are you voting for the game player, or are you voting for the character she designed for you?
And this kind of calculated strategic game playing, it stands in such stark contrast to the sheer conflict-driven approach of the next contestant we have to talk about, Farhanapad. Right, so if Kanya was the subtle, calculating manipulator, Farhanapad was the blunt instrument.
That's a good way to put it. She was described in the really charged language of the sources as the classless witch of conflict, or Kaleshi Chudale.
And we should probably clarify for the listener, Kaleshi Chudale literally means what? A demonic woman or witch dedicated solely to creating chaos and fighting.
That's it. Someone who thrives on conflict. And the backlash against Farhana is intensely rooted in a specific series of behaviors that viewers just found fundamentally unacceptable. And it starts with the accusation of profound ingratitude.
Towards Gaurav Khanna, GK.
Towards GK. You have to remember, Farhana was eliminated in the very first week. That's a quick exit. It signals a really poor public reception from the get-go.
But GK brought her back. He used his power to basically resurrect her entire journey, handing her the biggest lifeline of the season.
The biggest. And when he did, she explicitly promised him, GK, I owe you. She claimed eternal debt, eternal loyalty.
A promise that, according to the sources, didn't last very long.
Not at all. The sources point out that she almost immediately violated that promise. Within days, she began actively plotting and gossiping about the very man who saved her.
What was she saying?
She was talking to Tanya about how GK should leave the show because he was boring, he didn't have a game plan. She even apparently referred to him as a B-grade actor and other demeaning things in these private conversations.
So in the eyes of her critics, this just proved her fundamental lack of loyalty, her true nature.
That's what they said. It was betrayal and fast forward. It just demonstrated a complete disregard for the concept of, reciprocity.
But the complaints, they didn't stop at just personality conflicts. They got intensely personal. They focused on hygiene, which is always a source of friction in that house.
The hygiene accusations against Farhana were severe and very specific. And they generated this huge volume of fan disgust, which proves that viewers really do care about basic sanitary standards in the house.
What were the specific?
She was accused of highly unsanitary habits, including, allegedly, being the Hagodi #1, which is a blunt way of saying she wouldn't wash her hands after using the restroom.
Wow.
Other detailed claims included not cleaning her plates after eating and, maybe most shockingly, not bathing for 2 straight days. Instead, she would just apply makeup to conceal the lack of freshness.
That adds a layer of genuine physical stress to the general chaos of the house. I mean, when you compound all these conflicts with issues of basic health and hygiene, it's naturally going to raise the collective frustration level for every other housemate forced to live with her.
And that frustration, it absolutely boiled over, specifically regarding household duties. She constantly created chaos by demanding food, specifically Sheila's, at precisely the right time, while completely neglecting her own responsibilities.
She would delegate or complain or just ignore her own chores.
All of the above. This culminated in moments where Malek became so utterly frustrated with the dereliction of duty that he was quoted saying he wished he could slap people just to make them do their work.
So the stress of living with her was almost causing other housemates to contemplate violence.
Which is deeply ironic, because it's an aggressive thought born directly from the stress that Farhana's alleged neglect was creating.
Let's move to one of her actual physical clashes, specifically the one with Malti Chahar.
Right. This conflict was the perfect prelude to the high-intensity ticket to finale mayhem. The fight with Malti Chahar started over something incredibly petty: dirty, used tissues.
As these things often do.
The argument escalated near a table where Farhana had her foot resting up. Malti, who was trying to do her cleaning duty, asked her repeatedly to move her foot. When Farhana didn't comply, Malti allegedly lightly kicked Farhana's foot off the table.
And that momentary, minimal physical contact was enough for Farhana, too.
To escalate the situation immediately, she threatened to throw Malti out of the house entirely.
And the sources consistently paint this picture of Farhana and Tanya as being constantly in lockstep, creating this trio of chaos with the final member of this conflict group.
Absolutely. The third member, Neelam Giri, who was colorfully and disparagingly labeled in the sources as the Garduli Gomanti tea seller.
A very specific insult.
And while she was generally seen as more of a follower, her specific moment of controversy really cemented her place in the Hall of Shame for this season.
And what was the action that the sources claim crossed all limits of decency?
It was the spitting incident. Neelam allegedly crossed all limits of shamelessness by deliberately spitting into the house pool, contaminating a communal space.
And this wasn't spontaneous.
No, not at all. She was instigated by Miradul and Shibaz, who were provoking her during a heated fight. But when the issue was raised and she was confronted by the host and other housemates, she offered this really flimsy justification.
What was her excuse?
She just said, "They told us something different, so we spat." The implication was that she was just acting purely on provocation, that she had no agency of her own.
And that's where the critic's analysis comes in, to really condemn that lack of critical thinking.
Yes, a prominent critic used that exact quote to deliver this searing retort that just summarized the lack of a moral compass. They asked, "If they ask you to eat poison, will you eat poison?"
Right.
It highlighted her apparent complete lack of self-control and inability to process right from wrong when she was provoked, making her actions look utterly thoughtless and easily led. This incident just further fed into the narrative that this trio operated without any sense of collective responsibility for the house environment.
So we've established these intense character conflicts, the betrayals, the lack of sanitary standards. But the real intrigue, and what so many viewers focus on, is the belief that these events weren't just random acts of desperation, but that they were guided by something larger.
The shadow of the script.
Exactly.
And this is where we shift our analysis from just observing the individual conflicts to observing the system itself. The perception of production bias, or the script, becomes incredibly strong when the fate of a popular or volatile contestant seems to align a little too perfectly with a preset narrative structure.
And the primary target for this perception of manufactured reality was Abhishek Bajaj.
Without a doubt.
The sources are very explicit that his journey, and particularly his sudden downfall, was seen as scripted or heavily controlled by the makers. And they seem to be drawing on familiar tactics from past seasons.
This is a crucial comparative analysis. The sources draw a direct and frankly startling parallel between Abhishek Bajaj's treatment and the treatment of Umar Riaz in Bigg Boss 15.
Okay.
In both seasons, the sources claim that the production established a very specific, very damaging narrative set early on, that the contestant was fundamentally aggressive, that they suffered from uncontrollable anger issues, and was therefore inherently dangerous to the safety of others.
In this narrative, it acts like a kind of predetermined trajectory. It justifies the eventual eviction, regardless of how severe their actions actually were compared to other people in the house.
Precisely. And this narrative was allegedly solidified by the show's most powerful figure. Salman Khan's weekend cover confrontations with Abhishek Bajaj included these specific, highly personalized accusations that seemed designed to frame his reactions as overly aggressive.
For example?
Well, after one minor altercation, the host confronted him, stating, "You turned around, that means you charged." So the very act of turning your body was framed as an act of aggression.
That's a very subtle but very damning reframing of behavior.
It is. There were also moments where Salman aggressively suggested that Abhishek should be betied, which means bashed or beaten. The sources claim this persistent, aggressive criticism was being used unfairly to elevate another contestant, Amal Malik, by constantly making Abhishek appear wrong or morally inferior in contrast.
It was so intense that he got a formal warning.
He did. Salman Khan eventually gave Bajaj a formal last warning on camera, essentially painting him as a ticking time bomb.
And yet, despite receiving a last warning from the most powerful person associated with the show, Abhishek reportedly refused to change his confrontational style. He just stuck to his game plan.
He did. The sources indicate that despite multiple warnings and, public humiliation, Abhishek clung to his self-proclaimed my way or highway approach.
Which is a bold move.
It's bold, but maybe not smart. Crucially, instead of showing any gratitude or humility, he continued fighting with allies like Gaurav Khanna and the newly entered Pranit. He actually fought Pranit, even though Pranit and GK had notably taken the blame for a mistake involving Ashnoor and Abhishek.
An act of loyalty that should have earned his thanks.
It should have. Instead, he just argued, this Pranit won't tell me. Who is he to dictate? This failure to show any contrition or adapt his game basically sealed his fate outside of the top 5.
The narrative surrounding Abhishek's entire downfall, you really can't discuss it without mentioning his highly damaging, almost self-sacrificial bond with Ashnoor Kaur. The sources believe that was the single biggest contributing factor to his exit.
It was his fatal flaw. Abhishek's prioritization of Ashnoor above everything else, his game, his reputation, his other relationships, it essentially guaranteed he wasn't going to make it to the final round.
And what's amazing is that the host, Salman Khan, actually tried to warn him. He highlighted Ashnoor's deceitful nature toward him not once, but twice.
Actively trying to give him a clear warning.
So what were those 2 betrayals that the host explicitly called out, trying to wake Abhishek up?
The first time was during nominations. Ashnoor failed to save him and used the excuse of having a brain fade,
Which the host ridiculed.
completely ridiculed. The second, and maybe more egregious instance, happened when Abhishek won a really hard-fought captaincy task, and Ashnoor immediately stepped in to take credit for his victory. Salman made these moments crystal clear to Abhishek, suggesting his loyalty was being misplaced and exploited.
And how did Abhishek react to these glaring on-camera red flags?
He ignored them? Entirely. He maintained Ashnoor as his sole priority in every single aspect of the game nominations, captaincy tasks, general alliances. He consciously created no other meaningful relationships in the house, alienating potential allies like GK and Pranit in the process.
And if we analyze Ashnoor's side of this, the sources suggest she was being highly strategic about it.
Oh, very. She initially tried to align herself with stronger, more independent contestants like GK and Bassir, but when she realized they wouldn't just follow her lead, they weren't susceptible to being dictated to, she pivoted hard.
She essentially identified the most emotionally receptive and therefore the most manipulable partner available.
Precisely. She realized Abhishek Bajaj was easily moldable and would sacrifice his own game to make her his exclusive priority. And this pattern isn't new. It's a historically successful strategy in Bigg Boss.
We've seen it before.
We've seen it with Nimrit Kaur Ahluwalia focusing on Shift the Kaur in BB16, or Fakis relying on Karan Kundra in BB15. It is a calculated move to use a devoted partner as both a shield from elimination and an asset for tasks.
So beyond the targeting of Abhishek, there was this widespread perception that the show was actively, and sometimes overtly, promoting specific contestants.
Right.
Particularly Gaurav Khanna and intermittently Amal Malik. This leads us to the heavily discussed concept of the GK Jital Yojana.
The term GK Jital Yojana, which translates to the plan to make GK win, became fan shorthand for the alleged production bias towards Gaurav Khanna, and the speculation was intense.
What were the signs?
Well, sources point to several instances that fueled this perception. One major sign was the unexpected visit from celebrity director Farah Khan. She came into the house and explicitly called the show the Gaurav Khanna show.
Which would definitely validate the audience's suspicion that he was the pre-selected face of the season.
Absolutely. And the positive attention, it extended beyond just celebrity endorsements. It was woven into his personal narrative inside the house.
Right, with the Family Week visit.
Yes. His wife, Akamksha Chamola, visited during the highly emotional Family Week, and she was immediately dubbed a lucky charm by observers, which just amplified his positive, devoted family man narrative. Gaurav himself demonstrated high confidence, declaring "Main Hoon Superstar TV Ka" in one episode.
Which suggests he was already aware of his elevated status within the show's structure.
It suggests that, yeah.
So what about Amal Malik? His perception of host bias seemed to swing a bit throughout the season, which suggests a more complicated approach from the production side.
It was more complicated. Amal initially benefited from some overt host favoritism, perhaps positioning him as the next generation celebrity contestant. For instance, Salman Khan delivered a sharp critique of Mittal's performance, using Amal's journey as a measuring stick.
What did he say?
The host told Mittal, "Tumhara hawai jahaz to take off karte hi land kar jata hai, tumsi ko kuch na lamse," which basically means Amal's game was constantly starting and stopping poorly, and he needed guidance. However, Salman later delivered Amal a sharp reality check in a subsequent weekend kadivar for his aggressive behavior and for consistently avoiding confrontation with stronger housemates.
So the favoritism was conditional.
It was, but the ultimate, most tangible sign of make-a-favoritism is when career opportunities start dropping right into your lap while you are still competing inside the house.
That proves you're already selected for post-show success.
Absolutely. We have concrete evidence of high-level industry support that bypasses the need for the contestants to even win the trophy. The producer Ekta Kapoor made a highly publicized, significant appearance during a weekend Kavar episode.
And what did she do?
She openly offered roles in her upcoming television project to two specific contestants, Tanya Mittal and Amal Malik. This move publicly validated their relevance and popularity, cementing the idea that they were the show's industry favorites, regardless of public votes.
Which naturally just fueled the scripted conversation even more.
Of course.
So this pressure cooker atmosphere, combined with the perception of favoritism and these targeted narratives, it inevitably leads to explosions. And the final weeks brought us to several instances of physical violence, which is always the biggest red line for Bigg Boss.
It is the ultimate boundary, and the audience reaction to how these incidents were handled was a massive indicator of that perceived bias. The ticket to finale, or TTF task, was the immediate catalyst for the most intense physical confrontations.
And this created massive fan outrage.
It did. The contenders who made it to the final four of that task were Gaurav Khanna, Pranit Moore, Ashnoor and Farhana Pat.
And the first major physical fight involved Ashnoor and Tanya Mittal, tied directly to the competitive nature of that task.
The task involved contenders carrying bowls of water on wooden planks, and other housemates had the power to eliminate them by emptying their bowls. Tanya successfully eliminated Ashnoor by emptying her water.
And Ashnoor's reaction was not good.
Not good at all. In immediate response, Ashnoor, described in the sources as being in a fit of anger, was clearly seen hitting Tanya with the wooden plank used to carry the bowls.
Okay, that is a clear instance of physical violence, regardless of the severity. How did the show and the two women manage the aftermath of that?
Well, Tanya immediately seized on the incident. She accused Ashnoor of physical violence and setting fake narratives, emphasizing, "You are not even sorry after hitting me."
And what did Ashnoor say?
Instead of apologizing, Ashnoor countered defensively. She asked if Tanya had ever been sorry for the body shaming and the other psychological damage she had inflicted. So the argument became a kind of morality test rather than an accountability check.
And what was the audience's reaction given the show's historical, supposedly zero-tolerance policy for physical aggression?
The online uproar was immediate and fierce. Fans demanded Ashnoor's immediate eviction for physical violence, and they pointed to the show's history.
Right, people have been thrown out for less.
For much less. We've seen contestants expelled instantly. Armlan Kohli for physical assault, KRK for throwing a water bottle, and more recently, Jia Shankar for mixing hand wash in water. The fact that Ashnoor was not immediately removed for striking another contestant with an object,
it just fueled this massive perception of bias.
That certain favorites were immune to the rules, yes.
To fully understand the rage behind Ashnoor's action, though, we do have to connect it back to the body-shaming backstory. That was the psychological wound that was repeatedly exploited.
It was. Salman Khan had previously reprimanded Tanya, along with Kunika and Neelam, for their relentless and cruel body shaming of Ashnoor.
And what were the specific, highly offensive comments that were used against her?
The comments were just vicious. They called Ashnoor Hathi Jays, Dinosaur, Modi, Fugga Jays, Shakal Wali.
So elephant-like, dinosaur, fat, balloon-faced.
Horrible things. And Ashnoor had already broken down on camera, sharing the deeply personal pain that she had lost 9 kilograms before even entering the house, and that she struggled with weight gain under stress. So the violence from Ashnoor came directly on the heels of these repeated, intense personal attacks that the production itself had addressed but seemingly not stopped.
And the physical altercations continued, moving next to Malti Chahar and Farhana Pat, the aftermath of which we only briefly touched on earlier.
Yes, the tension between Malti and Farhana escalated really quickly over that used tissues argument. The sources confirm that the argument culminated when Malti lightly kicked Farhana's foot off the table.
And Farhana reacted with immediate escalation.
Of course, she threatened if Malti continued to kick like that, she would throw her out of the house. Malti retaliated by saying people on the streets are better than Farhana.
And the viewers were divided.
Deeply divided, as always. Those demanding Malti's eviction cited the no physical contact rule. But many others defended Malti. They argued that Farhana deliberately placed her foot there to provoke a reaction, using the rules to her advantage after she had been proven wrong in the duty argument.
It's a classic Bigg Boss scenario.
Absolutely, where intention versus action completely polarizes the audience.
So despite all this turmoil and the high-octane fighting, we saw some significant and unexpected exits right before the finale. Let's look at the exit of Kunika Sadanan first.
The first major surprise was the eviction of Kunika Sadanan. She wasn't just the senior contestant. She was widely regarded as a strong contender based on her maturity and her clear game strategy.
And she was voted out just 2 weeks before the finale.
Yes, on November 23, 2025. She secured the lowest votes among 4 nominees, which included Amal, Tanya, and Malti. It suggested a potential shift in voting demographics or just a massive, unseen wave of apathy toward her.
And even the host acknowledged the magnitude of her exit, suggesting it was maybe a mistake on the audience's part.
He did. Salman Khan called her departure a big loss for the season, and he praised her maturity and straightforward participation. Fans on social media echoed this disappointment, arguing she was far more deserving of a top 5 spot than some of the more chaotic contestants who remained.
And her eviction just added more fuel to the fire, that production favorites were being artificially saved, while genuine, if less dramatic, players were being eliminated. But the shock wasn't over. We then witnessed a dramatic and highly emotional double eviction, which effectively finalized the top 8.
This was the major, decisive twist. Abhishek Bajaj and Neelam Giri were eliminated simultaneously, and the power given to the captain was absolutely key here.
The captain was Prenit Moore.
Captain Prenit Moore was allowed to save one person from the bottom 3, which were Ashnoor, Abhishek, and Neelam.
And Prenit, despite his close bond and respect for Abhishek, he chose Ashnoor, leaving Abhishek and Neelam to be evicted. So why Ashnoor?
Well, sources suggest Prenit's choice was strategic. He believed Ashnoor had a higher chance of continuing the fight, or perhaps he was feeling pressure given her status in the house.
And how did they handle their exits?
Abhishek handled his exit with remarkable composure, but he delivered this pointed, emotional message to a sobbing Ashnoor. He encouraged her to bring the trophy and trust no one in the house.
A clear final condemnation of the deceitful nature of the game and maybe Ashnoor's own actions.
It felt like it. Meanwhile, Neelam gave a tight hug to a tearful Tanya Mittal, and she provided a moment of levity by joking, "Bahar jaake tujhe block karne wali hu," signaling that while the game was over, the grudges were not.
The cinematic timing of this double eviction was really amplified by the dramatic entrance of Prenit Moore, just a day before Abhishek, his close friend, departed.
It was a masterstroke of narrative timing. It maximized the emotional impact. Prenit entered the house right before his friend's final exit, leading to this incredibly emotional scene where Abhishek, supported by Meridul, joyfully carried Prenit on his shoulder.
A brief moment of genuine friendship.
A brief moment of genuine, non-strategic friendship amid all the chaos.
And Prenit's arrival was actually delayed, which gave him a convenient emotional backstory for his absence.
Yes. His entry was delayed because he was recovering from dengue. Sources humorously speculated he contracted it from a mosquito bite while hiding in his favorite and notoriously unhygienic spot, a kopcha, or corner, in the storeroom.
Recovered or not, Prenit immediately plunged right into the conflict. He was quick to take on the trio of Tanya and Farhana.
Unapologetic and confident. He immediately clashed with them, confidently shutting down their attempts to gang up on him. The conflict intensified when Tanya, using her classy persona, took a dig at his perceived lack of sophistication.
Arguing that people like her wouldn't give him respect.
Exactly. And Prenit delivered a devastating and memorable comeback that instantly went viral.
And what was his specific comeback that cut right to the heart of Tanya's alleged hypocrisy?
He delivered a verbal knockout punch. He accused her type of people of making their bodyguards wear their sandals.
फिर 6 लोग हैं जो बॉडीगार्ड से चप्पल पहनवाते हैं ways log chahi nahi mujhe.
Wow. It brilliantly reversed the narrative. It suggested that her proclaimed class was just a facade rooted in arrogance and disrespect for labor, making Prenant seem like the more morally grounded figure, despite his perceived lack of polish.
And he didn't stop there. He called the duo out specifically on their group dynamics and their bullying tactics.
He labeled Tanya and Farhana doggle, or hypocrites, for consistently fighting in pairs and using their collective presence to intimidate others, rather than engaging in honest confrontation.
And they tried to undermine him.
They did. Farhana and Tanya accused him of only making jokes about them, calling him a joker, and Prenant fired back, asserting, "At least I have talent and I'm entertaining."
And the sources confirmed that he was actually targeting everyone in the house with jokes. Everyone. Miridul, Shehbaz, Amal, Neelam, and Kunika. It proved that the duo's claim about him only targeting them was just a self-serving distortion of the truth.
So we've navigated the chaos, the betrayals, the evictions, all the way down to the wire. As we barrel toward the December 7th, 2025 finale, what is the current landscape? Who is left, and who does the audience think is going to take the trophy?
Okay, so as of now, after the exits of Kunika, Abhishek, and Neelam, the top 8 contestants remaining are Amal Malik, Farhana Bhatt, Ashnoor Kaur, Gaurav Khanna, Prenant Moore, Tanya Mittal, Malti Chahar, and Shehbaz Bowdesha.
And Gaurav Khanna has already secured his spot, which changes the dynamics of this final week significantly.
Yes. Gaurav Khanna is confirmed as the first finalist. He secured immunity by winning the ticket to finale task and simultaneously gaining captaincy. He's playing the long game, completely safe from the public vote in this final stretch.
So what are the online sentiments telling us about the likely trajectory of the remaining spots? What are the key fan prediction groups prioritizing?
Well, Reddit predictions, which are often highly tuned to fan sentiment and tracking, they offer a pretty strong consensus for the top 5. Gaurav Khanna remains the predicted winner. He's cited as having the highest overall votes among all contestants due to his stable image.
And who's next?
Prenant Moore is predicted to be the first runner-up. He's benefiting from a strong and unexpected organic fan following that was generated by his authentic personality and that recent clash with the toxic trio.
It's interesting that the highly controversial Farhana Bhatt is still predicted to place so high.
It is. She's predicted to be the second runner-up, and this isn't based on her moral standing, but surprisingly, on her highly visible, polarizing social media presence.
Controversy, as always, translates into visibility and engagement, even if it's negative.
That's the formula. Amal Malik and Tanya Mittal round out the predicted finalists, leveraging their established celebrity status and, the earlier support from the production.
But the voting trends, which are the real-time indicators as of November 27th, they tell a slightly different and perhaps more immediate story than the long-term predictions. Who's actually leading in this final voting window?
The current voting trends for Week 14 show a highly volatile situation. Prenant Moore is actually leading the pack with 19% of the votes, confirming his organic fan base is mobilizing strongly.
Wow.
Shehbaz Bowdesha is surprisingly close behind at 16%, followed by Tanya Mittal at 15%. Gaurav Khanna is also holding at 15%. Farhana Bhatt sits in that crucial middle ground with 14%.
And at the bottom?
At the bottom, struggling to stay afloat, is Malti Chahar with just 5%. She's relying heavily on the external public support from the cricket community connections her family holds to be saved. The margins are incredibly tight. The difference between second and fifth place is just 2%.
That's fascinating. How the predicted winner isn't currently leading the live vote, suggesting a final surge or a major twist is still in store. Before we wrap up the analysis of the game, we need to address the environment itself, which is the ultimate piece of evidence supporting this whole manufactured reality concept.
Yes, the source material provided an extremely interesting final detail about the technical complexity of the house, which speaks volumes about the level of control the show maintains over the contestants and the drama.
And what did that viral behind-the-scenes video of the Bigg Boss 19 control room reveal?
It confirmed that the Bigg Boss 19 house is a thoroughly engineered, completely closed environment. The most telling detail is that the house has no manual switches inside.
Think about that for a moment.
Right.
So contestants cannot simply turn off a light or adjust the heating or lock a door.
Exactly. Every single utility, the lights, the water supply, the AC, the gas connections, and critically, the door locks, is controlled externally and remotely from the central control room. Contestants literally cannot control their immediate environment or their comfort level.
That is just a profound level of control.
And it means the production team can subtly manipulate the environment to heighten or diminish drama, ensure compliance, and even increase stress to generate conflict. For example, they can cut the hot water to force an argument over bathing, or turn up the AC to make the housemates irritable.
That adds a profound layer to the scripted conversation. Even if the words coming out of the contestants' mouths are spontaneous, the conditions under which they are spoken are entirely artificial and controlled to maximize emotional reaction.
And furthermore, the sources highlight the presence of two-way mirrors inside the house. This isn't just about cameras. This allows the crew to constantly monitor the contestants 24 hours a day without being seen, capturing every tiny detail and nonverbal cue for the final edit.
It's an utterly managed ecosystem.
Where authentic behavior is almost impossible because they are aware they are being watched, but production is also watching every micro-expression.
That is the perfect way to summarize this final deep dive. We've witnessed raw emotions, ingratitude, violence, and genuine, albeit brief, friendships. But all of this is occurring within a meticulously manufactured reality framework where the rules of the environment itself are designed to maximize chaos.
The actions of the contestants are real, but the environment, the editing, the host commentary, and the ultimate presentation of the narrative are managed, shaping the audience's perception entirely.
And that's the true definition of the script in reality television. It's not necessarily line-by-line dialogue.
No, it's the structural bias, the environmental manipulation, and the editing that crafts a specific hero or villain trajectory. And as we saw with Tanya Mittal, sometimes the contestants themselves catch on to that. They identify the emotional vulnerability of the audience and attempt to exploit it strategically.
It brings us back to that core tension, sincerity versus strategy. The game is less about who is truly popular and more about who executes the best perceived narrative.
It does. I mean, we've seen that one contestant, Tanya Mittal, openly planned to manipulate the emotional Indian audience, using calculated psychological strategies like the Ram card. So considering the pervasive feeling among fans that the show is heavily influenced by a script or maker bias, and considering the physical evidence of that control room, how much of the final winner's success will ultimately be attributed to genuine, spontaneous popularity?
And how much is merely the successful execution of an emotional strategy, one designed specifically to use the audience's heart against their logical votes?
That is the fascinating and maybe cynical question you have to answer as you watch the final episodes unfold.